The document landed on the polished conference table with a soft sound that somehow felt like a gunshot. I was sitting in a glass-walled room at Westbridge National Bank, the kind of space where every surface reflects back your own confusion. The loan officer, a woman named Claire Donovan with sharp eyes and a professional smile, slid the paper toward me. "Mrs. Caldwell, this is the deed to your property at 847 Maple Ridge Drive. It was pledged as collateral for a business loan approved 6 weeks ago." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. I stared at the document, my address, my home, the house I'd spent 3 years saving for before we even got married. The mortgage we'd celebrated paying down to 60%. Our home. Except I'd never authorized any loan. I'd never signed anything. I'd never even heard about a business loan until Claire called yesterday asking us to come in for a routine verification meeting. My husband, Derek, sat beside me in his expensive suit, the one he wore when he wanted to project confidence. His jaw was tight, his shoulders squared. When I turned to look at him, his expression was carefully neutral. Before I could speak, Derek's voice filled the room, smooth, controlled, dismissive in a way that made my skin prickle. "She knows about this, Claire. We discussed it." His hand found my knee under the table, fingers squeezing too hard, a warning disguised as affection. I felt the pressure through my dress pants, insistent and uncomfortable. "We are building the portfolio together," he continued, looking at Claire with that charming smile he used when he wanted something. "Right, honey." The endearment sounded wrong in his mouth, performative. Claire's eyes shifted from Derek to me, her professional demeanor unchanged but something in her expression sharpening. She was waiting for me to confirm his statement, waiting for me to nod along, play the supportive wife, validate whatever story Derek had already constructed. The silence stretched. Derek's grip tightened another fraction. I could feel him willing me to agree, to smooth this over, to make this meeting end quickly so we could leave and he could explain everything away in private. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he'd answered for me. Maybe it was the squeeze of his hand that felt more like control than comfort. Maybe it was just instinct. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "What loan?" The words hung in the air. Derek's hand went still on my knee. Claire's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in her professional facade. That's when the full weight of it hit me, crystallizing into a single, devastating realization. My husband pledged our home as collateral without my consent. Not a misunderstanding. Not a miscommunication. A deliberate action taken without my knowledge, using our shared property, risking the home I'd worked so hard to help build. "Mrs. Caldwell," Claire said carefully, her tone shifting from routine to concerned, "you listed as a co-owner of the property. Your husband submitted spousal consent documentation when he secured a $200,000 business loan using the house as collateral. $200,000. The number seemed impossible. When?" I asked. Derek shifted beside me, his hand finally leaving my knee. "Megan, we can discuss this at home." "When?" I repeated, looking at Claire, not him. She consulted her screen. "The loan was approved on March 15th. 6 weeks ago." March 15th. The date meant nothing to me. I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar, scrolling back. Then I saw it. March 15th was the Tuesday after my mother's emergency surgery. Let me tell you who I am, because it matters for understanding how completely I was blindsided. My name is Megan Caldwell. I'm 36 years old, a senior project coordinator at Ashford Development, and I've been married to Derek for 8 years. I was raised by practical parents who taught me that marriage meant partnership, that major decisions were made together, that trust was earned through transparency. Derek and I met through mutual friends at a charity fundraiser. He was charming, ambitious, confident in ways I admired. He worked in commercial real estate investment, talked about building portfolios and creating generational wealth. He made me feel like we were a team working toward the same future. We bought our house together 4 years ago. It was my dream home, a 3-bedroom craftsman with a renovated kitchen and a backyard perfect for the children we talked about having someday. I'd saved for years for that down payment, working extra hours, budgeting meticulously. Derek contributed too, though his finances were always more complicated, tied up in investments I didn't fully understand. I trusted him. That was my mistake. I trusted him with our shared accounts, with financial decisions, with the assumption that what's mine is ours went both ways. I never imagined he'd use that trust as a weapon. Our marriage had settled into comfortable patterns over the years. I handled the household budget, paid the mortgage and utilities, managed our day-to-day expenses. Derek handled what he called the big picture, investments, retirement planning, strategic financial moves. He'd explain his projects in broad strokes, using terms like equity positions and leverage opportunities that sounded impressive but vague. I never questioned it. He was good at his job, brought home a solid salary, seemed confident in his decisions. When we bought the house, we'd agreed it was ours equally. Both names on the deed, both responsible for the mortgage. It represented security, stability, the foundation for our future. I'd been so proud signing those papers, feeling like we'd achieved something real together. Looking back, I can see the red flags I ignored. The way Derek would make financial decisions and inform me after the fact. The times he'd dismiss my questions with phrases like "trust me" or "I've got this handled." The subtle ways he positioned himself as the financial expert and me as the one who worried too much about details. But they were small things, easy to rationalize. Every marriage has its dynamics, I told myself. Every couple divides responsibilities differently. I was busy with my own career, grateful to have someone confident handling investments. I didn't realize confidence and competence weren't the same thing. March had been a nightmare month. My mother, who lived 2 states away, had needed emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix that had gone septic. The call came on a Thursday night, my father's voice shaking as he explained she was in intensive care, the surgery risky, the recovery uncertain. I'd left the next morning, throwing clothes in a suitcase, booking the first flight out. Derek had driven me to the airport, kissed my forehead, told me to take all the time I needed. "Don't worry about anything here," he'd said. "I'll handle all the paperwork and bills. Just focus on your mom." I'd been gone for 3 weeks. 3 long weeks of hospital rooms and rehabilitation centers, of helping my father navigate insurance claims and medical decisions, of watching my mother slowly, painfully recover. Derek had called every few days, his voice supportive and understanding. He'd sent flowers to the hospital. He'd told me repeatedly not to rush back, that everything at home was fine. Handle paperwork had apparently meant something very different to him than it did to me. Now, sitting in this bank conference room, I pulled up my text messages from March, scrolling through our exchanges. Nothing about a loan. Nothing about using our house as collateral. Nothing that even hinted at a major financial decision. Just supportive messages about my mom and reassurances that home was fine. Claire cleared her throat gently, pulling my attention back to the present. "Mrs. Caldwell, I need to ask you directly. Did you sign spousal consent documentation for this loan?" "No," I said clearly. "I've never seen any loan documents." Derek leaned forward, his voice taking on that reasonable tone he used when he wanted to sound patient. "Megan, I explained this to you before you left for your mom's. You were stressed. You probably don't remember." "I remember everything about that time," I interrupted, looking at him directly. "You never mentioned a loan." Claire's fingers moved across her keyboard. "The documentation shows spousal consent was obtained. There's a signature on file." "May I see it?" I asked. She hesitated, then turned her monitor so I could view the screen. There it was, a digital consent form, dated March 10th, 5 days before the loan approval. And at the bottom, what appeared to be my signature. I studied it carefully. The signature looked similar to mine, but not quite right. The loops were slightly different, the pressure inconsistent. "That's not my signature," I said. Derek's jaw clenched. "Megan, that's not my signature," I repeated, louder this time. "And I was in Connecticut on March 10th. I have flight records, hospital visitor logs, credit card statements placing me 2 states away." Claire made a note on her screen, her expression professionally neutral, but I could see concern deepening in her eyes. "This triggers a review process." The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. Derek's hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, his knuckles white. I stared out the passenger window, watching familiar streets pass by, feeling like I was seeing everything through new eyes. When we pulled into our driveway, our beautiful driveway leading to our beautiful house that apparently Derek had gambled without asking, he finally spoke. "You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be." His voice was quiet but sharp, controlled rage barely contained beneath a thin layer of civility. "This is a business opportunity. The loan is secured, the investment is sound. I was protecting you from stress while your mother was sick." "Protecting me," I repeated, not as a question. "You forged my signature and used our home as collateral for a loan I knew nothing about, and you call that protection? Don't be dramatic." He turned off the engine, but didn't move to get out. "We are married. It's our property. I had every right. You had no right." I cut him off. His head snapped toward me, eyes flashing. "Don't embarrass me, Megan. Claire probably thinks you unstable now, making accusations. I'm not the one who committed fraud." The word landed between us like a live grenade. Derek's face went red. For a moment, I thought he might yell, might lose the careful control he always maintained. Instead, he got out of the car, slammed the door, and walked into the house without looking back. I sat in the car for another 5 minutes, my heart pounding, my hands shaking with delayed adrenaline. Then I pulled out my phone and did something I'd never done before. I took screenshots of everything. Our text message history from March, my calendar showing my mother's surgery date and my flight bookings, the hospital visitor logs I'd received for insurance purposes. I opened our shared cloud storage and started downloading files. Bank statements, mortgage documents, every piece of financial paperwork I could access. Derek's confidence that I wouldn't question him, wouldn't investigate, wouldn't fight back, that confidence was his mistake. I'd been raised to be accommodating, to trust, to believe the best in people. But I'd also been raised to protect myself, to document everything, to understand that loyalty without verification was just naivety. That night, after Derek went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and created a new folder. I labeled it simply House Loan Documentation. I organized everything chronologically. Every text message, every bank statement, every piece of evidence showing I'd been out of state when that consent form was supposedly signed. I wasn't sure yet what I was building, wasn't sure where this would lead. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't scared. I was methodical. And Derek had no idea what that meant. The next morning, I called Claire Donovan from my car during lunch break, parked in a corner of the office lot where no one would overhear. "I need to speak with your compliance department," I told her. There was a brief pause. "Mrs. Caldwell, I want you to know that we take consent verification very seriously. Your statement yesterday has already initiated a formal review." "Good," I said. "I have additional documentation. Flight records, hospital logs, credit card statements, all proving I was out of state when that consent form was dated. Can you send those to me?" Claire asked, her voice careful. "I'll forward them to our compliance officer." I emailed everything within the hour. That afternoon, I received a call from a woman named Patricia Russo, Westbridge National's senior compliance officer. Her voice was professional but warm, the kind of tone that invited honesty. "Mrs. Caldwell, thank you for providing this documentation. I've reviewed your materials and compared them to the loan file. I need to be honest with you. There are discrepancies that concern us. What kind of discrepancies? I asked. Timeline inconsistencies. The consent form shows a digital signature obtained through our online portal on March 10th at 2:47 p.m. Eastern Time. Your credit card records show you making a purchase in Hartford, Connecticut at 2:52 p.m. that same day. My heart rate quickened. So someone else accessed the portal using my information. That's what it appears to indicate, Patricia said carefully. There's more. This isn't the first issue we've had with loans involving your husband. 2 weeks passed in a strange suspended state. Derek acted like nothing had happened, like we hadn't sat in that conference room, like I hadn't challenged him. He went to work, came home, made small talk about his day. He didn't mention the loan. Didn't ask about the bank's review. Didn't acknowledge that anything was wrong. It was gaslighting through absence, making me doubt whether the confrontation had even happened. On a Saturday evening, we attended a family dinner at his sister's house. Derek's family was successful and competitive. His father was a retired investment banker. His mother came from old money. His sister Vanessa worked in corporate law. They'd always made me feel slightly inadequate, slightly too middle class, slightly not quite enough. Derek held court at dinner, as he always did, telling stories about his recent projects. I'm working on a major investment opportunity, he said, refilling his wine glass. Leveraging assets to maximize returns. It's going to double our portfolio in 3 years. I sipped my water, saying nothing. Vanessa leaned forward, interested. What kind of assets are you leveraging? Real estate primarily, Derek said smoothly, using equity positions to secure better opportunities. His father nodded approvingly. Smart. That's how you build real wealth. I watched Derek bask in their approval, watched him perform confidence and success. And I smiled. Just smiled and stayed quiet. That's when Vanessa asked the question that started unraveling everything. Wait, Vanessa said, setting down her fork. Did you say you leveraged the Maple Ridge property, your primary residence? Derek's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Among other things, it's a diversified approach. But you said in February that the house was your safe asset. You said you'd never touch it because Megan was particular about the mortgage. Something flickered across Derek's face. Annoyance, maybe fear. Plans change. We discussed it and decided. I thought Megan was in Connecticut in March. Vanessa continued, not accusatory, just confused. When her mom had surgery. Didn't you say you were handling everything alone for a few weeks? The table went quiet. Derek's father looked at him. His mother's hand paused halfway to her wine glass. I stayed perfectly still, letting the contradiction hang in the air. It was before that, Derek said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Vanessa, you literally texted me about Megan being gone during March, his sister said, pulling out her phone. You complained about having to handle household stuff alone. You said it was week 3 and you were exhausted. She scrolled, then read aloud, 3 weeks of single life. Can't wait for Megan to get back so I don't have to think about laundry. The date stamp on the text, March 24th. My mother looked at Derek, then at me. Did you approve a loan in March while you were in Connecticut? Everyone was looking at me now. I took a sip of water, set down my glass carefully. No, I said simply. I learned about it 2 weeks ago in a bank meeting. The silence that followed was profound. Derek's face had gone pale. Vanessa's phone was still in her hand, the text message visible. His father's expression shifted from approval to something harder to read. The fallout from that dinner didn't come immediately, but it came thoroughly. Vanessa called me 2 days later, her voice tight with controlled anger. Megan, I need to ask you something directly. Did Derek forge your consent for that loan? The bank is investigating, I said carefully. They've found timeline issues with the signature. She was quiet for a long moment. He's done this before. My breath caught. What do you mean? Not exactly this, but similar things. Overstating his authority on deals. Representing consensus that didn't exist. Dad had to clean up a mess at Derek's previous firm before he moved to his current position. I wasn't supposed to tell you. The information settled over me like cold water. This wasn't an isolated mistake. This was a pattern. The next revelation came from an unexpected source. Patricia Rousseau from the bank called me at work, asking if we could meet privately. We sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from my office, and she slid a folder across the table. "This is confidential," Patricia said, "but you need to know. The loan your husband obtained, it wasn't entirely for business investment." "What was it for?" I asked, opening the folder. Inside were loan documents detailing how the money was allocated. $50,000 had gone to pay down Derek's personal credit cards. Another $30,000 had covered trading losses in his investment account. Only the remaining $120,000 had actually gone toward the business opportunity he'd described. "He was underwater," Patricia said quietly, "and he used your house to bail himself out." That night, Derek tried a different approach. He came home with flowers, expensive ones, my favorite lilies, and an apology. "I should have been more transparent," he said, setting the bouquet on the kitchen counter. "I was trying to handle things during a stressful time, and I made some procedural errors." Procedural errors. That's what he was calling fraud now. "I've been under a lot of pressure at work," he continued. "The market's been volatile. I made some calls that didn't work out the way I planned, and I was trying to fix things before you had to worry about them." "By using our home without my knowledge," I said. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I used to find endearing. "You were dealing with your mother's health crisis. You were emotionally unavailable. Not your fault, just the reality. I couldn't burden you with my work stress on top of everything else." Emotionally unavailable. That's what he was going with. Blaming my mother's life-threatening illness for his decision to commit fraud. "So you decided to forge my signature and risk our home because you thought I was too emotional to handle information?" I asked. "That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant." I pulled out my phone and opened my email. "The bank is requesting documentation from both of us. They want to verify the consent process was legitimate. They are asking for proof that I was informed and agreed." Derek's expression hardened. "What did you tell them?" "The truth." His jaw clenched. "You really going to do this? Make this an official issue?" "You made it an official issue when you forged my consent." The bank's investigation moved faster than I expected. Within a week, Patricia called me back. "Mrs. Caldwell, our forensic review has identified several concerns. The IP address associated with the digital signature doesn't match your known devices. The signature itself, when analyzed against your legitimate documents, shows inconsistencies. And most significantly, the timeline places you definitively out of state with documented alibis." "What does this mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "It means the consent was likely fraudulent. We are opening a formal investigation into how this occurred and who had access to your login credentials." "My husband," I said. "He has my passwords." "I never thought. That's common," Patricia said gently. "Spouses often share access. The question is whether that access was misused." She paused. "There's something else. We've been reviewing all loans processed through the same channel during March. Your husband's application had flags that should have triggered additional verification but was somehow bypassed. We are looking into whether proper protocols were followed." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about our house anymore. This was about potential banking fraud, bypass security measures, possible collusion. "Your husband submitted a written statement to our investigation team yesterday," Patricia continued. "He claims you gave verbal consent and that the signature was obtained through a phone verification process. He says you were aware but forgot due to stress." I laughed, a sharp bitter sound. "And you believed that?" "No, because phone verifications are recorded, and there's no record of any call to you during the relevant time period. His defense is provably false. 3 days later, the loan was frozen. Derek received notification from the bank that pending the investigation's completion, all loan disbursements were suspended and immediate repayment of distributed funds was required. He called me 7 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. He sent text messages that progressed from confusion to anger to desperation. We need to talk about this. You're making a huge mistake. This affects both of us. Answer your phone, Megan. You're going to regret this. I saved every message and forwarded them to Patricia. That evening, Derek showed up at my office just before closing. I was packing my laptop when the receptionist called. Mrs. Caldwell, your husband is in the lobby asking to see you. I could have gone down, could have met him privately. Instead, I asked her to send him up to the shared workspace where my entire team could see us. He entered the floor looking disheveled, tie loosened, hair messy, eyes wild in a way I'd never seen. Half my colleagues looked up from their computers. We need to talk, Derek said loudly. Privately. We can talk here, I replied calmly, not standing from my desk. You're making a scene. No, Derek. You made the scene when you forged my signature. I'm just dealing with the consequences. His face flushed red. I didn't forge anything. You gave me permission. No, I didn't. And the bank's forensic analysis proves it. My co-workers had stopped even pretending to work now. Derek looked around, finally realizing we had an audience. This is inappropriate, he hissed. No, what's inappropriate is pledging someone's home without their consent. I stood now, gathering my things. Security will walk you out. The security escort was humiliating for Derek, 2 uniformed guards flanking him through the office, past colleagues and clients, down the elevator and out to the street. My boss, Catherine, came to my desk immediately after. Are you okay? Do you need time off? I'm fine, I said, and surprisingly, I was. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had solid ground beneath me. I appreciate your concern, but I'd rather work. It helps to focus on something I can control. Catherine nodded, studying my face. That was brave, what you just did. A lot of people would have handled that privately. He was counting on me handling it privately, I replied. He assumed I'd protect him, hide the truth, preserve his image. I'm done protecting him. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a man's voice said, Mrs. Caldwell, this is Brian Foster from Harrington Wealth Management, your husband's employer. We need to schedule a meeting. There are some concerns about risk disclosures related to personal financial liabilities that may affect his position here. I agreed to meet. The next morning, I sat in a corporate conference room with Brian and 2 other executives. They looked uncomfortable, which told me everything I needed to know before they spoke. Your husband's loan situation has come to our attention, Brian began. Employees in his position are required to disclose any significant personal financial changes that might affect their judgment or create conflicts of interest. A $200,000 loan secured against personal property should have been reported. Was it? I asked, though I knew the answer. No. And there are additional concerns about how he represented his financial stability to clients. We are conducting an internal review. The internal review at Derek's firm moved parallel to the bank's investigation, 2 separate processes that kept intersecting and amplifying each other. Each new discovery in one triggered questions in the other. The bank found that Derek had backdated documents. The firm found he'd misrepresented his clearances. The bank uncovered altered communications. The firm discovered unreported conflicts of interest. Patricia called me with updates I never asked for, but was grimly grateful to receive. The investigation has expanded, she told me. We are reviewing all loans your husband processed or facilitated in the past 2 years. There are pattern concerns, not just with his personal loan, but with how he's advised other clients. Other clients? I echoed. Several loans he recommended involved aggressive leverage strategies similar to what he used personally. Some clients are now questioning whether they received appropriate risk disclosures. The scope was staggering. This wasn't just about my house anymore. It was about systemic issues with Derek's judgment, ethics, and professional conduct. Mrs. Caldwell, I want to be clear about something, Patricia said. What your husband did to you, using your property without consent, is being treated as a serious criminal matter. The bank is cooperating with law enforcement. This goes beyond internal policy violations. Criminal matter. The words settled over me heavily. I'd wanted accountability, wanted Derek to face consequences. But hearing it spelled out so starkly made it real in a way I hadn't fully processed. Derek's written statement to the bank arrived at my attorney's office. Yes, I'd hired an attorney by this point, a sharp woman named Claire Winters who specialized in financial fraud and family law. She read his 12-page defense and handed it to me with a raised eyebrow. Read page 7, paragraph 3, she said. I found the section she indicated. Derek had written, my wife, though intelligent in her own right, lacks the sophisticated financial understanding necessary to appreciate complex investment strategies. I made the decision to move forward with the loan without burdening her with technical details she wouldn't fully grasp, acting as her financial partner and protector within the bounds of our marriage. I read it twice, anger building with each word. His calling me stupid, I said. His calling you incompetent, Claire corrected. Which is interesting, because it directly contradicts his earlier claim that you gave informed consent. You can't simultaneously argue that someone lacks the capacity to understand financial decisions and that they knowingly agreed to a loan. She pulled out a highlighter and marked several sections. He contradicts himself 17 times in this document. He says you were emotionally unavailable, then claims you participated in planning calls. He says he acted to protect you, then argues you were fully informed. He says the signature was legitimate, then suggests the bank's verification process was flawed. So what does this mean? I asked. It means his defense is collapsing under the weight of its own inconsistencies, and he submitted this formally under penalty of perjury. Claire smiled grimly. One sentence in particular is going to ruin him. The one sentence Claire identified appeared on page 9. I maintain that all actions taken were within the normal scope of marital financial decision-making and that any irregularities in documentation were the result of banking system errors rather than intentional misrepresentation. His blaming the bank, Claire explained. His saying their system failed, not that he committed fraud. Which means the bank now has motivation to prove definitively that their systems worked correctly and that he deliberately circumvented them. She was right. Within days, the bank issued a formal finding. The loan application showed clear evidence of unauthorized access to my account, digital signature manipulation, and falsified consent documentation. They were calling it misrepresentation with intent to defraud. Derek's employment was suspended pending the investigation's conclusion. His access to client accounts was immediately terminated. His professional licenses were flagged for review. The loan was called, full amount due immediately, with the house collateral frozen. Derek defaulted within a week. He couldn't come up with $200,000. The money he borrowed was already spent, gone into covering debts and failed investments and lifestyle expenses he couldn't sustain. I filed for legal separation the same day the default was recorded. Not divorce yet. That would come later, but formal separation that divided our assets and liabilities. My attorney filed emergency motions to protect my interest in the house, to prevent Derek from accessing shared accounts, to establish that his debts were his alone. Derek showed up at the house on a Wednesday evening, letting himself in with his key before I could change the locks. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard the front door open. My first instinct was fear. He'd never been violent, but desperation changed people. But when he appeared in the doorway, He didn't look angry. He looked broken. "Megan, please. We need to talk." I set down my knife and faced him across the island. "Your attorney can talk to my attorney." "I'm losing everything," he said, his voice cracking. "My job, my reputation, my career. The firm is terminating me. The bank is prosecuting. I might face criminal charges." "Yes," I said simply. "I didn't mean for this to happen. You meant to forge my signature. You meant to use our house without asking. You just didn't mean to get caught." Derek moved closer, his hands reaching across the counter. "I was trying to save us. I was in debt. I made some bad investments, and I was trying to fix it before you found out. I was protecting you." "Stop," I interrupted. "Stop calling it protection. Protection would have been honesty. Protection would have been asking for help. What you did was theft." "I'm your husband," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Doesn't that mean anything? 8 years of marriage, and you're going to throw it away over this?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I was seeing clearly for the first time in years. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." The bank's final determination came through official channels, a formal letter to Derek, copies to his attorney and mine, stating their findings. I read it 3 times, savoring the clarity of each conclusion. The bank had confirmed that consent was never properly obtained. They'd verified that digital access logs showed Derek's device, not mine, accessing my account. They'd documented that the signature analysis proved forgery. They'd established that he'd bypassed security protocols designed to prevent exactly this kind of fraud. Most significantly, they determined that the spousal consent requirement existed specifically to protect against unilateral decisions by one partner. By circumventing it, Derek had violated both the loan agreement and state property laws. The house was being released from collateral status. The loan was being restructured as unsecured debt, Derek's debt, not mine. My name was being cleared from all associated liability. Patricia Russo called me personally to deliver the news. "Mrs. Caldwell, I want you to know that our investigation found no fault on your part. You were the victim of financial fraud by a trusted family member. The bank takes full responsibility for not catching the irregularities sooner." "Thank you," I said, emotion thick in my throat. "What happens now?" "Your husband's loan defaults to unsecured status. He's personally liable for the full amount plus penalties. The bank is pursuing legal action to recover funds. And your property is clear. You can refinance if you choose, remove his name from the deed, do whatever you need to do." "And his defense?" I asked. "Collapse completely." The divorce papers were filed 6 weeks after the bank's determination. My attorney had advised waiting until all financial investigations concluded so we could clearly separate Derek's liabilities from my assets. The settlement was straightforward because I had clear documentation of everything. The house was mine, purchased primarily with my down payment, mortgage paid from my income, illegally leveraged by Derek without consent. Our shared accounts were divided proportionally based on contributions. Derek's debts, including the now unsecured loan, were his alone. His 401k and investment accounts, what was left of them after his trading losses, were his to keep. I wanted nothing that was entangled with his financial chaos. The process was surprisingly smooth, probably because Derek's attorney advised him not to fight. He had no leverage, no moral high ground, no sympathetic narrative. He'd committed fraud against his own wife. No judge would look favorably on that. The final hearing was brief. Derek didn't attend in person, participating by phone from wherever he'd moved after leaving our house. When the judge asked if he contested any terms, his voice came through the speaker quiet and defeated. "No, Your Honor." "Then by the power vested in me, this marriage is dissolved." The judge signed the papers. I signed the papers. And just like that, 8 years ended. Not with drama or tears or final confrontations, but with signatures and legal language and the quiet closing of a door I'd finally found the strength to walk through. I kept the house, which felt like poetic justice. The home Derek had tried to gamble away without asking became mine alone. I refinanced the mortgage in my name only, getting better terms because my credit hadn't been damaged by his fraud. I changed the locks, finally, months after I should have. I repainted the bedroom walls from the neutral beige Derek had insisted on to a deep blue I'd always wanted. I filled the space with things that were mine: plants, art, books stacked on every surface. Slowly, the house transformed from ours to mine. 1 year after that first meeting in the bank conference room, I was promoted to senior director at Ashford Development. Catherine, my boss, called me into her office and told me they'd been impressed by how I'd handled the crisis with Derek, the composure, the documentation, the refusal to be silenced. "You showed strength that a lot of people don't have," she said. "We want leaders like that." The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek's attempt to control me, to use me, to diminish me, it had ultimately revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. I'd thought of myself as accommodating, maybe even passive. But when it mattered, I'd been strategic, methodical, and absolutely ruthless in protecting what was mine. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard updates about Derek occasionally. He'd moved to another state, taken a lower-level position at a smaller firm. His license suspension had been extended. The bank's lawsuit was still pending. He'd lost everything by believing I'd never look closely enough, never question deeply enough, never fight back. The silence I'd maintained during our marriage, the accommodation, the trust, the willingness to let him lead, he'd mistaken it for weakness. He'd assumed quiet loyalty meant I wouldn't defend myself. That was his fatal error. Today, I'm sitting in my living room, in my house, with my name alone on the deed, watching evening light filter through windows I chose new curtains for last month. The house feels different now. Lighter. More honest. It's been 18 months since that conference room meeting that changed everything. 18 months of investigations, confrontations, legal proceedings, and ultimately, freedom. People sometimes ask if I regret how things turned out, if I wish I'd handled it differently, stayed quiet, worked it out privately. The answer is always no. What Derek did wasn't a mistake I could forgive. It was a betrayal that revealed who he'd always been, someone who valued control over partnership, who saw my trust as exploitable rather than sacred. The bank's discovery didn't just collapse his defense. It collapsed the entire facade of our marriage, showing me what I'd been too trusting to see before. I built a new life from that rubble, a life where I make every decision, where no one has access to what's mine without explicit permission, where my name on a document means something I control. I learned that knowing your worth isn't about being loud or aggressive. It's about being willing to verify, to question, to say no. It's about understanding that quiet loyalty without boundaries isn't love. It's just an invitation for exploitation. Derek lost everything by assuming I'd never look closely. I won everything by finally opening my eyes. The most dangerous thing you can do to someone who never respected you is simply start respecting yourself. That's the lesson. That's the victory. And that's why I smile every time I walk through my front door, turn the lock, and know with absolute certainty that this space, this peace, this life, it's all mine.